Sonic Forces has most certainly left us all with a lot to think about. Right now, the Sonic series seems to be in a state of ambiguity with no real purpose or direction. Forces is the perfect embodiment of that. The game doesn't feel like it has any real purpose, and that's very disheartening. It doesn't feel like any passion is being put into these games anymore. It feels like they're just being developed because SEGA thinks it's obligated to. I compare Sonic to Mario because the two were so closely related in the 90s. They both originated in similar situations, yet ended up in two distinct positions today. Whenever a new Mario title comes out, it feels like the developers worked on it because they wanted to, because they loved doing so. I don't get that with the Sonic series anymore. These games feel rushed and mass-produced. I genuinely believe the last Sonic game that had tons of love and passion poured into it was back in 2008 with Sonic Unleashed. That game came out 9 years ago, and I still don't think we've gotten an experience to top it yet. This entire situation has me thinking about the future, and what direction, if any, the series will go next. A popular topic of debate in the fanbase right now is what type of gameplay style will the next Sonic game adopt? Will it be reminiscent of the Blue Blur's early 2000 outings, or stick with the current boost formula? I thought about what I would want from the next Sonic game, and quickly came to realize that even if I'm kind of impartial to one or the other, I would still like to see them tackle the boost formula, as I think there's tons of hidden potential there. And that got me thinking even further. What could be done with the boost? And after tons of questioning and theorizing, I think I've postulated an alternative to the boost formula that eclipses the original in every way. If you've stuck around this long, join me as I tackle one of Sonic's most controversial playstyles to date and attempt to fix the boost formula. Before we get started, as per usual, we should address the boost formula's greatest flaws, with the most obvious being that the boost at its core isn't a very engaging gameplay mechanic. By holding a button, the player can tap into Sonic's endless reserves of speed and plow through hordes of enemies with ease. It makes sense that it is the most appreciated gameplay style, as installments prior would require more deliberation from the player. You needed to actually be actively playing the game in order to get past the enemies. The boost can sometimes make the game feel like an interactive movie instead of an actual video game. I mean, look at some of the things people have been able to do in Sonic Forces. Being able to play any stage in any AAA Sonic game with such ease, especially if you're blindfolded, is not acceptable. The boost is also super toxic to the development of games. Obviously, when Sonic is boosting, he's covering more ground faster. As a result, Sonic Team needs to build stages to accommodate for these new levels of speed,
dashing like a maniac through the stages.
This is where the infamous boost to win phrase originates. There are tons of straight, barren stretches of land within these levels, and their purpose is to give the players somewhere to go with the boost. They're not only unneeded, but most important of all, take away focus from the aspects of the stages that should take priority. Those being good enemy placement, challenging platforming, and ways to use your speed to your advantage. As you can probably imagine, a lot of boost stages neglect to properly incorporate speed and platforming. You're either going really fast or slogging through some lackluster platforming. And it's not like it's impossible to have these two aspects of gameplay work in tandem with one another. Generations made tweaks to the boost and its complementary moves, then developed stages to adhere to both Sonic's speed-based and platforming aspects. And it was absolutely stellar. This can be done, but it requires tons of care and attention to detail. You can't be sloppy with it or guided by a flawed ideology. You have to know exactly what you're doing and how you're going to do it. It should work with Sonic's moveset, not overpower it. I've used this analogy before, but the boost should be treated like sugar in a cookie recipe. It's incredible when in reasonable doses, but can ruin the entire batch in excess. With the way it's currently being handled, that's what the boost is doing to the modern Sonic line of games. It's holding them back. If Sonic Team wants to continue with the boost in the future, they're going to have to make some serious changes to the way it works in game. That's where I come in. Let's start with the controls, as they're going to be the basis for everything I cover in this video. As per usual, the player would position Sonic using the left thumbstick and move the camera using the right. Tapping the A button would let the player jump, and tapping it again would activate the homing attack. If you're not locked onto an enemy while using the homing attack, Sonic would dash forward, similar to Generations and Unleashed. B would be the bounce, like the bounce bracelet in Sonic Adventure 2. This move would replace the stomp, a detail I'll go further into during this video. X would be the boost, obviously, and Y would be the action button. And by that, I mean any interaction with Sonic and his environment would be done with the Y button. This could range from hypothetically opening a door, or picking up an item, or throwing objects at enemies. You perform tricks using the left and right bumpers while mid-air. A new and very crucial addition to this moveset would be the mapping of the spin dash to the left trigger, and the mapping of the rolling to the right trigger. Despite having almost 20 years worth of modern Sonic games, I can't think of one that has effectively used the triggers within its control scheme. And I don't mean camera control, I mean meaningful revisions to the control scheme that changed the game for the better. The Adventure series is notorious for having confusing control schemes that map multiple actions to the same button. This can lead to heaps of frustration and cheap death. With this new simplistic control scheme, all of Sonic's actions would have their own respective buttons so that the player is always in 100% control. The first thing we'll cover is how Sonic should move in this new 3D environment. To put it bluntly, Sonic controls pretty terribly in his latest 3D titles. Boost Sonic has absolutely no momentum or weight to him. He feels super slippery and at times can move too fast for his own good. It's kind of ridiculous at times. And this is why I think it'd be appropriate for us to base the foundation of this playstyle on what was introduced in Adventure. While this Sonic could be fast, he was also very easy to control. His movements had weight to them and it made player input feel satisfying. If you were going too slow, you wouldn't be able to run up this wall or around this loop-de-loop. It felt like your speed actually mattered. And most important of all, you had to earn it. This is how Sonic should play in 3D. His movements should be crisp and fluid, but most important of all, should allow for the utmost control and effective utilization of speed and quick timing. Momentum and physics should also take high priority. It'd be best if the player can use their speed and weight to reach top speeds and do the cool, flashy stuff you always see Sonic doing during cutscenes and movies. You should be able to use your speed to launch yourself in the air, do tricks, and find shortcuts throughout the stage. And yes, the trick system from Generations and technically Sonic Rush would be returning. It'd be a cool way for players to earn extra points and bonuses for completing stages as flashy and extravagantly as possible, similar to the cool points you score in Adventure 2, except this time it'd be clear how to earn them. Free falling would also return in this new playstyle, except instead of holding X to nosedive directly downward, you would be able to dart in any direction you felt fit. So theoretically, you could launch yourself into the air by boosting your spin dashing off a slope, then dart around using a combination of the homing attack and nosedive. Speaking of the homing attack, let's talk about that. One thing that always bothered me about the homing attack is that you're always stopped dead in your tracks after using it. And while in past Sonic games this hasn't stifled level design too much, it was abused up the wazoo in Sonic Forces. Like seriously, there are tons of segments in this game where everything is slowed down so the player can use the homing attack. Delete that. Instead of this janky, slow and time-consuming primitive bull, how about you apply the way the balloon works in Generations and Colors to the homing attack? Make that the norm. It's so fun to string together homing attacks on these balloons and jettison yourself forward. You want to know why? It's because it's an effective use of Sonic's momentum. He feels like he has weight whenever he does this, which only makes it all the more satisfying. Imagine doing this in the air and in large, expansive environments. It'd be so fun. You should also make the jump floatier and higher. Trying to jump with modern Sonic in some of the current boost games, Sonic Forces, is a real pain sometimes. It's too stiff and fast. Okay, slow it down a bit by giving the player more control so that they don't risk falling off the platform or completely flying over it as a result of a slight touch of the thumbstick. This is also one of the biggest reasons as to why I'm replacing the stomp with the boost. The stomp always brought you to a dead stomp, and while that was its intended purpose, I only really found myself doing it in very specific situations. Not only do I think the bounce would be more complementary to this playstyle, but can also help the player reorient themselves without coming to a dead stop. This should work similarly to the way it worked in Adventure 2, with the height and trajectory of the bounce being dependent on Sonic's location on the map. Now, before we move on to the meat of this video, let's address something I brought up earlier, the spin dash and the roll. While the pair wasn't broken in the Adventure titles, they were in no way well implemented. I don't think it felt all too satisfying to use the roll in these games, especially since it was mapped to the same button as the spin dash. Holding down on the thumbstick or a D-pad was seamless, and I don't think tapping a button felt as satisfying. So to fix that, I would have the player hold the left trigger to roll, and once they let go of it or lose too much momentum, Sonic would return to his neutral stand. And to use the spin dash, the player would hold the right trigger and could alternatively rev it up by pressing it down repeatedly. They could do this both in the air and on the ground, giving modern Sonic a drop dash of his own. This just seems like a more effective use of the controller and its buttons. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the main event, the boost. First things first, the boost would no longer be filled with a collection of rings or wisp capsules. The rings are too plentiful of a source to actually allow the boost to work in a way that doesn't inhibit the rest of the gameplay and level design, and the wisp are just too irrelevant to actually make sense in a new AAA Sonic game. Sonic Team needs to invent a new source for the boost in this game, and I think I have the perfect solution. First off, bring item boxes back, the shield, invincibility, and maybe some fresh ones to give this new take on Sonic a different spin. One of these new items would in fact be the blue sphere. This would be the new way to power the boost. The gauge would fill up 25% every single time the player jumped or homing attacked into blue sphere capsules, and the player would be able to use it at any time. It wouldn't be split into increments such as in Unleashed Wii, but would work how it always has. And Sonic wouldn't be able to plow through enemies while using the boost. In order to do that, he'd have to roll using LT. This roll would also allow the player a slight speed boost to lengthen the duration of the boost a little longer, and would have a little delay so that the player couldn't spam it. Tons of slopes, ramps, and loops should be present, and it'd be cool if there were elements of each stage that would allow Sonic to interact with his environment in unique ways. You know, set pieces that had an impact on the way the player could play the game. For example, what if there was a snow stage where Sonic could break off pieces of trees or use scrap metal from a badnik as a snowboard down slopes? Or better yet, what if Sonic could land on badniks and use their abilities for a couple of seconds before they explode? Sort of hijacking them and using them for a couple of seconds. Pretty much anything that allows the player to traverse through the stage as they feel fit. I designed this playstyle to truly shine in an open world environment. I mean, technically, it could work with any Sonic design pattern, but I honestly think it can only reach its full potential in an open world environment or really big stages. Sonic should be able to zoom across the map and glide through the air as he pleases. I also said before we should bring back elemental shields and add new ones, so this could be another way for the player to go through the stage. Once they equip a shield and use the Y button, then Sonic activates the shield's ability. The fire shield could allow Sonic to do an air boost similar to the one in Forces, and also maybe emit some sort of shockwave. The lightning shield lets Sonic do a light speed dash. The bubble shield can allow Sonic to slide across the stage by wetting the ground beneath him. Think of it like snowboarding without a board. And some new ones could be a forest shield that launches Sonic into the air using a pillar erupting from the ground so that he could free fall back down. And maybe a wind shield that gives Sonic multiple floatier jumps and either makes the boost last longer or allows his homing attack to lock onto multiple targets like in Lost World. And in order for this all to work, you need to place things effectively and strategically. The boost should be a reward for clever play, not a given. Don't overpopulate the stage with blue sphere capsules, make them kinda scarce, a commodity that makes the game all the more enjoyable when you find them. That's it. The boost was such a problem before because it didn't require the player to do anything. It was too available and allowed Sonic to plow through everything. No real thought or deliberation from the player was required, and as a result, some of these games, Sonic Forces, really did seem boost to win. The boost as a mechanic can 100% work and be at home in a Sonic game, but if Sega is actually going to accomplish this, they're going to have to put more thought into the style as a whole, and put people who know what they are doing into power. We don't need naive developers like this one heading our Sonic games. Bring back the guy who did Generations, or even just hire someone who is capable of making good Sonic games. You know, like the 3D equivalent of Christian Whitehead. This series has tons of potential, there's no doubt about that in my mind, but Sega seriously would need to step up their game and put in the time to fulfill that potential. Find a direction, see if it works, and then stick to it. End of story. Modern Sonic is getting more and more unpolished each year, when it should be the opposite. Figure things out behind the scenes, Sega. Get the right people and then give us a Sonic game to beat them all. I know you can do it. We know you can do it. Now it's time for you to start believing you can do it. Or, you know, you could just sell Sonic to Nintendo or whatever. They're gonna make him really good.